Bwrdd A pawb, croeso gynnes iawn i'r cyfarfod heddiw. A very warm welcome to everybody on this wonderful November day. I have received no apologies for absence. Can I ask for declarations of interest, please, from board members that are not already declared and that are pertinent to today's agenda? I've received none, and there's none here. No, thank you very much. Earlier this morning, the board went into in-committee session, and we're now in an open board session. Can I please go to the minutes of the last board meeting? And this is for accuracy, please. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10. Are you happy that that there are no material issues about accuracy?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can I go now to 1.8, the action log? David, how are we doing on the action log? All actions are completed. Any issues from board members? Can I please go back to the unconfirmed minutes then, please, of the board meeting? Now it's for matters arising that are not on today's substantive agenda. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6. John?
Chair, can I just note that on the minutes and at the top of the page, it was agreed that I would meet with Rhiannon and the Chief Executive with regards to details in terms of our financial planning and also the mechanisms we use to predict our financial modelling. That has taken place. I have to say it was incredibly helpful, particularly considering my questions at previous votes, and I look forward to perhaps more robust modelling in the future.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Page 8. No, sorry, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. Are you happy for me to sign these minutes off?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just say something? I missed it in relation to the action log. The first action was that all of the board members would be invited to the EDI network. And I remember saying that actually you and I automatically attend that,
Yeah.
and could the action sheet be updated to say that we already have the chair and the EDI champion of the board does attend that routinely. So it was an invitation to all board members.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Okay. We now go on to the most fascinating part of the day, which is the chair's report. I take it everybody's read it. I do want to say a couple of things. For me, it is really important to understand that hope is necessary in any situation. So whilst the opening of my report seems to be a litany of woe, I thought it was very important to lay down the background under which we are operating. Health and social care is very important to the population. There are huge forces of harm at the moment driven by an economy. And I have to say that the demand and the need is at exceptional levels. And we are in the midst of going through the booster immunizations for the population. So we're not out of COVID. We're in a different place with COVID. It's moved from being a pandemic, probably some form of endemic. The importance of the workforce and the pipeline into the workforce has never been more important. The staff working in the NHS and care at this moment in time are working exceptionally hard. and the reinforcing that workforce is really important. So I underline the importance of continuing the investment in education and training. I also want to point out that there has been exceptional leadership at all levels throughout the pandemic, and that requirement for exceptional leadership is not diminished. In fact, it is raised. So our work in leading on the compassionate and collective leadership agenda is truly important. You can see from my report that the organisation has been really busy during this period. And highlights for me, I do want to highlight the launch of the mental health plan. It was really good to see so many partners there, and including board members. But I have to say, what came home to me was really how service users who had formed help groups and support mechanisms, how important that is to the future. And it was really heartwarming to hear some of the stories. So I'd like to thank everybody involved in that piece of work. The Deputy Minister stayed for the whole of that morning. A big investment in a minister's time, but I think everybody came out of that meeting uplifted and committed to delivering. The other thing I would like to say is and this goes back to your comment about equality, diversity and inclusion. We have a significant number of people coming into our health service, either to train or to work from overseas. And their contributions have been historically long and well connected into Wales, and we have got a good reputation for welcoming. So I joined the SAS conference, and the SAS doctors are the bedrock of some of our most acute services. The other conference I attended was the BAPIO conference, the British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. And for the first time, I joined the BINA conference, which is the British Indian Nursing Association. And there was a really good debate about ethical recruitment. And I think the importance of not just looking after the professional end, but looking after the pastoral support that people need when they come into our country, and to support our efforts to sustain the NHS really hit home to me. Our EDI team have been very active, and as an organisation, and Julie, I have to say, it was a real privilege to represent the NHS in Wales in laying a wreath, to recognise the contribution of people who aren't easily seen. So I was really touched by that, and it was a very moving ceremony, and I'm very grateful to our team and their work. Hush and I also met with the Minister for Social Justice, Jane Hutt, and our work through the ward programme in supporting professionals who come into the country under some of the most distressful personal circumstances, with some of them in threat of their lives. The work to support them does them justice, but does our NHS a world of good. So I'm very proud of those areas of work. And finally, I was really miffed to miss our staff conference. And from what colleagues around the table have told me, I really did miss out on something that was very special. And that is about sharing across the organisation the intense work and the focused work that is going to support our NHS and social care colleagues. So can I just say, I'm sorry I missed it, and I won't ever miss one again. It wasn't my fault. And finally, there have been no chair's actions. It was a real privilege to chair the external reference group earlier this week. There is a summary. It was done in haste. If I've missed anything, I do apologise. But it was, I think, a very helpful and informative set of discussions that were held, and will help us in our IMTP process in particular. And the amount of support about the primary care efforts that we are making to support proper education and training of the multidisciplinary team. I think that's all I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to answer any questions or hand them over to people who can answer them.
Can I just add to what you said about the awards programme? We're getting this, on average, a new referral every day from people who've come here from Ukraine to get assistance for registering as doctors or dentists and some other professionals as well here in Wales. So it's expanding really rapidly. I've literally had that email today. And we're also expanding that service to pharmacists as well. There's a large number of pharmacists who are seeking registration. So just to say we're expanding, trying to see how we can expand it into other professional areas.
Just very quickly, Chair, on the official launch of the Strategic Mental Health Workforce Plan, I obviously attended that as well. And there were two things that struck me from the launch. Firstly, the very strong ministerial commitment to the plan itself, but also the strong ministerial commitment to the way in which the partnership between HEIW and Social Care Wales, working very, very closely together in some detail and with a huge level of commitment, has delivered this. And I know I always go back to saying that whenever we're looking at what we do as an organisation and what our services do externally, the role of social care and that wider network of professionals and services that attempt to keep people well is really important. And I think that, you know, certainly the Deputy Minister's presence, but also that clear commitment and recognition of that partnership was extremely strong. The second bit, I thought it was fantastic to hear from members of staff who had themselves, in a variety of different circumstances, lived with the consequences of mental ill health, and hear them utilise that experience in a way to help others, I thought was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
That empathetic nature of that was super.
Very moving.
It was extremely moving, and it was amazing to hear it. But there was a real buzz in the room. It was fantastic to see people excited by this piece of work.
Thank you. Okay.
You missed a great event on the 3rd of October, but you were also missed. I just wanted to say we had opportunity to introduce ourselves as independent members, and I don't know how that went down, but I thought that was a very valuable thing to have done, and that if we have other chances to do that, I'd be very happy to do that on other occasions. So I'm speaking on behalf of colleagues, they may not be, but I thought it was useful.
Okay, without further ado, then I'll hand over to Alex for the Chief Exec's report.
Okay, well, as usual, you've stolen all my thunder, so it's very little for me to add to my report. I think a number of the items I've mentioned there are going to come up on the agenda in more detail today. I suppose just a reflection from me at this point in the year is that we've got to remember we're the strategic workforce body, and where we can make most benefit to the system is looking at how we solve some of the problems that are dragging the system down at the moment, without getting dragged down into those problems ourselves. And that's a really hard challenge. But with the resources, the expertise and the opportunities that we have is to make sure that we have that sustainable way out of these problems. You know, that balance is always something that we're very mindful of, how we can help in the short term, keep our eye on the fact that if nobody's looking at the longer term, very difficult for us to find a way out. And that's why I think the strategic workforce plan paper that's on the agenda today is really, really important, because they tried to take that parallel approach of doing some of those immediate things to help, but also build in that more comprehensive approach, which does take on board all of those 7 pieces of the workforce strategy. but also linking with other partners across the UK to get the best of what else is happening. So we have got ongoing conversations with Health Education England about their long-term strategic workforce planning framework, and other key experts who we see on the national scene supporting with things like workforce planning and workforce modelling. So we're looking forward to that discussion later on in the agenda. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, please, Alice? Jill?
I wasn't sure sort of to ask it now or as part of the strategic workforce planning update, but it's sort of clearly it's quite a few of my other questions that it's probably worth asking now, which is absolutely on board with us keeping the long-term view and helping in the short term, absolutely what we should be doing. But I guess each time I see a paper, I wonder how we decided whether we help or how much we help, and how and who makes the decision about which things we dive into and try and solve, as it were. So it came to mind when I looked at the maternity and neonatal paper and others, which is we're obviously doing really helpful interventions, really helpful work and all the rest of it. But as a board, how do we know which areas and who decides? Is there a ranking, or is there some sort of, you know, commentary on what we do and what we don't do?
And well, a lot of it is driven by the workforce strategy and the IMTP. Yeah. So obviously nursing, pharmacy and dental are considering our IMTP for this year. Mental health was a priority last year. And maternity and neonatal was probably something which arose out of the Ockenden report in particular, which wasn't published until we'd finished our IMTP. And we've been working closely with the maternity and neonatal network. And so all of the contribution in that paper that you'll see today has arisen from engagement with clinical, professional, operational staff from those services as a result of network engagement, but broader participation as well. So, so I think the priorities are determined by our IMTP. What specifically we do within those areas is in conjunction with the service really. Clearly, we have our expertise to bring to the table, but they've got their expertise and knowledge of, you know, what it's really like at the moment. So that's and similarly with primary care, we're working closely with the strategic programme for primary care and the National Primary Care Board. So we're not doing any of this work in isolation.
No, sorry, can I just, because it does come into not so much that we're doing it in isolation. It's, I suppose, reflecting our impact in some ways and not spreading ourselves too thinly. I know I mentioned it before, but it's who decides, I suppose, which key areas. I know part of the IMC and say brought into the weather areas, and I guess it's how we decide so we're not overstretched with maximum impact in some areas. Sorry, I'm labouring the point. Sorry.
Yeah, so obviously we have a conversation at the executive team about all of these things, and if they're out of line with our IMTP, we would bring those pieces of work back. I think at the moment we are spending our resource on the things we've already agreed. We've got a number of priorities being fed into the IMTP for next year that are starting to be scoped. Everything that we do has to be in line with the ministerial priorities. So that is the acid test. I suppose it is a very difficult situation for us to say no, because I think what we're seeing post-COVID is everybody wants to have a more strategic pathway out of some of the current problems they're facing. And so in some instances we're saying, let's just start with a look at the immediate priorities as what we've done with the maternity and neonatal. You know, what comes out of the evidence and the engagement about things we could do in the short term, but we will need more resource to do a proper plan. We'll need to put that in the IMTP for next year. We're doing a similar thing with diagnostics. So to try and balance it like that, because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? So it is quite a difficult conversation, but you're quite right, all of that needs to be overseen by the board. I think that far as I'm aware at the moment, I think we're still in line with what we would be prioritising through our IETP.
John and Tina.
Thank you, Chair. So when I refer to a section of the report around strategic workforce planning, firstly, I certainly think the board would welcome your earlier comments around our responsibility as a board and as an organisation in terms of our statutory responsibility around workforce planning. All I would add to that is, of course, we've got a track record to do that in an integrated way, to consider social care as well as just the needs of health boards. So that's just to add to the comments that I would welcome. I guess my question is, can you just remind the board with regards to the 3 other strategic workforce plans that you note? I may have missed it, but the timelines around those 3 in terms of nursing, pharmacy and technical workforce.
We'll come on to that in the paper later on the agenda, but they are all pieces of work that should be completed by the end of this year. They may not be published, may not all be published by then, but certainly the intention would be to publish early into 23-24 if they're not published in the next quarter.
Tina.
Thanks, Chair. Alex, there's a couple of points I have. One is in relation to your opening paragraph where you've noted that the organisation is exceptionally busy and developing on that. And I guess it's important to make sure that we've got the resources we need to deliver, and seeking confirmation of that. The second thing is in relation to the ministerial directives that were given for strategic workforce planning. One of the areas that I have found immensely beneficial is as an independent member visiting the consultation processes with each of those plans and listening to staff engaged at health boards to demonstrate that we are listening and much of the strategic plan is based on that agenda. And I think it would be helpful if we could, on reflection going forward, look at the ministerial directives that we've been given as the Special Health Authority and how we've delivered on those. And some of that consultation when we're out listening to people, I think it would be helpful to deliver that message as well as to how we deliver for the ministerial directives based on the workforce plans, how we then consult on those workforce plans for the implementation success of that going forward. So it would be helpful, I think, for the board to actually receive an update in. I know we get the IMGPs, we look at that, we look at our own plan, but actually how we've delivered since we're now 4 years in since conception, and I think it'd be fitting to look to see just where the successes have been, where there have been challenges, and whether, taking on board what you said at the beginning of your report, the organisation is exceptionally busy developing those programmes, maybe for us to take a strategic look to see whether our engagement with Welsh Government officials politically is actually also meaningful, so they're acutely aware of how or the impact we're having.
Thank you, Chair. I just mentioned in your report that you held or we held a political briefing session on primary care. I mean, sometimes very difficult to know how useful these are in terms of an outcome, but they can be very valuable. And I just wondered if this is something that we do as a regular thing, or was this just a one-off? And do we need to be thinking about it in the context of some of the challenges we face ongoing?
So it's a regular thing we started about a year ago. So I think we do them every 3 or 4 months, every 6 months, yeah. So I think this was our third, that was our third political briefing. So we picked up dental previously, leadership, so a couple of key topics. We generally try to keep them to an hour because I think we get more better attendance then.
It's quite helpful, I think, to have those flagged so that we know that they've happened.
I think we have.
Oh, they do. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. I think there's some very important points being made. I think the thing for me about that mental health plan was the engagement and the inclusivity of it, from service users to every level. I thought it was very impressive, and if that is our modus operandi, then I feel very comfortable that's going to yield very positively going forwards. Okay, so do you want to finish anything? Okay, right. I'm going to move us on now to agenda item 3.1, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Anton. Hello, Anton. How are you, good boy? You all right?
Very good.
Yeah. So we're here to consider the simulation strategy, and the board members have received your very helpful paper. Over to you, and push.
Yeah. So if I can just kick off, I know Anton as Anton, like everybody does, but I have to remind everybody the Director of Education Improvement and Investment Scenery. He's also stepping in for Tom while he's been away as a postgrad dean. So this simulation strategy has been long in the making. It started a couple of years ago now when we went to recruit a single lead for simulation within the medical degree. We had such a good field, we ended up appointing 3. And subsequent to that, and they were all doctors, all anaesthetists as well, which is what our profession is. But we felt that to make it more multi-professional, we needed input from others as well. So we've now got 5 people from different professional backgrounds, all contributing to the simulation faculty. It's one of our strategic objectives, and this has already been through exec team and had a number of laps around the track. And Ivan, that's Ivan's phrase, that always reminds me, and I'm here for Anton to talk to it in a little bit more detail, but
it's also been to board members in a development section earlier.
Yeah. Anton?
Thank you. What about and thanks, Bush. There are 31 pages here for me to read to you, but I won't do that. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Bush. I've been asked to be brief, so I will try and be to the point. This is HEIW's simulation strategy and vision for simulation-based education and training for the healthcare workforce for Wales going forward. And you will have seen that the vision is for excellence in interprofessional education for high quality, sustainable and safe care across Wales. And Bush has already alluded to the fact that this is a truly multi-professional team who works across the spectrum of healthcare in Wales. And that vision, I think, aligns perfectly to our values. Together as a team, respect for all and ideas that improve. Now, the mission statements, I'm not going to read all of them out. They're in front of you, but I would refer you to the colorful picture in the front, which sets out the four objectives and the 12 aims underneath those. Just a little bit of an introduction. The team was put together in the middle of a pandemic in 2020. They have delivered on many aspects of things within the strategy within that time already. Simulation-based education and training is going to be an integral part of healthcare training and learning for the future, and we need to set the agenda and the tone for Wales, we think. The benefits of the strategy is clearly articulated to the patients and the service users, the learners, and those benefits that we describe to the system as a whole. The strategy has been delivered and designed with both the learner, the user, and the educators and the workforce surrounding that in mind. And there has been quite extensive consultation around the strategy. There are some mentioned in the appendix, but there's been a large amount of consultation. So the areas that the themes that were generated around our strategic vision for the next 5 years are those around engagement with people and partnerships, the promotion of quality, supporting simulation delivery, and designing future directions. No one of these are more important than anyone else. They are all interlinked and of equal importance. When we talk about engagement with people and partnerships, the simulation community across Wales is an active one, and there are many people involved in it. And one of the main functions of our simulation team is to bring those people together and act as a focal point for Wales, for sharing, collaborating, and working on new ideas. So within that area of engagement, we have communicating and networking with some more deliverables underneath those, development of a digital platform, and we've been working with our colleagues in the executive team of the digital office. And I didn't say at the beginning because I forgot, and the first thing that I was going to say is that I am presenting this strategy on behalf of the simulation team. The simulation team has been supported throughout this process, a bit by myself as the SRO for this, but by the simulation steering group chaired by Bush and Lisa, by the executive team who has been extremely engaged and has guided us through step by step. We're very grateful. When it comes to promoting quality, of course, it will be an area where I will pause a little bit, knowing me, but we have done work on this area already and has much more to do. Faculty development is already in progress, and we have delivered our first online faculty development sessions. We are working towards standards and quality assurance, and as far as standards go, there is now an agreement for us to endorse the Association for Simulated Practice in Healthcare Standards, and in fact Wales now has a member on the executive board of that group, which is from within our simulation team, and Wales is definitely on the map in simulation. We will always evaluate our work. When it comes to the delivery of simulation, accessibility, the development of interprofessional based education and teams and CPD is of vital importance, and we have plans in place to do more of that work. And then we come to future directions. The future, as I've said before, is a bit inconvenient because it arrived unannounced and too soon. Immersive technologies is going to be an integral part of the delivery of simulation-based education and training and other training and healthcare delivery. And we have already started that piece of work together with our colleagues here in HEIW. Research and evidence-based practice is definitely on our agenda. I'm not going to read through all of this, but the simulation strategy is the plans that we make to get to our eventual goal in the future. You will ask, how are you going to implement that? And every strategy has implementation behind it. And our strategy will be supported by an implementation plan, and we will use our current IMTP approach with objectives, deliverables, milestones, where we can set out in a step-by-step manner the steps that we will take, and we will be able to report back to performance and the board in a quarterly fashion on how we have achieved this. I didn't want to talk through it any longer. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anton. I enjoyed this paper, so I'm going to go open. This is, you know, this is interesting. I'm going to go now to board members. John, I saw your hand first.
Thank you to the team and to executives for the paper. Excellent paper, I have to say, and certainly a way of learning that we as a board would want to support. You've answered my question about the delivery plan and how we're going to monitor that. I think that's important, particularly when we've got the list of objectives towards the end. Can I just make a humble suggestion? There's an emphasis within the strategy about safety and quality for users, patients, etc. If I was a learner, the key thing about simulation-based learning is that I can learn in a safe way. If I make a mistake, it's not a problem. And I think the biggest benefit is one, in professional nature, but secondly, it's a safe way. The paper only refers to that on one occasion, about it being safe for learners, and I would say that that needs to be littered through the document, that it's good for learners because it's a safe way of learning. My question then also is how we're going to align this strategy with strategies that are being developed within educational providers and health boards, and that alignment is a little bit of conversation in the strategy, it's not quite clear. And my last question, if I may, Chair, what opportunities are we taking to identify research funding to support digital platforms to deliver simulation-based education?
So Sean, I like that. Anton, do you want to start? And then
I'm glad you asked about the safety aspect. I think there are others around the table who are well placed to comment, but 20% of the nursing-based curriculum is now based in simulation to make it safe. And it's so implicit to us that maybe we didn't write it everywhere. There is another small aspect to this that I'm not sure is for the board, but I'm going to say it anyway. Simulation as a tool for improvement is really important, and HEIW is leading on a project to show how that can be done, and that's going to be presented I think next spring, and I will keep you up to date with that. But that's also the other angle of safety. In terms of research opportunity and immersive technologies, I can refer to Sean, I think.
So there has been.
keep it short, Sean, keep it
Yeah,
short.
there's been an expert CRI where that Cardiff and Vale NHS Trust partnered with industry. There's a heck of a lot of learning out of that, and the academic organisations were involved, universities were involved in that. We want to take that to the next level and look at really some different partnering with industry where it's not a purchase arrangement. So we're currently in the really early stages of conversations with legal and risk about how we set up some of those partnerships. And to be honest, we are being a challenge because it's not the conventional way of doing things, but that's in motion. And we'll describe that once that concludes into the INCP for next year.
Each of the board members wants to come in now, right? So
I'm just going to say something on the alignment.
Yeah.
It does align. There's simulation is a requirement in many of the medical curriculum already, so it is completely aligned to those, and I think it is to a lot of other professional areas too. So I think it is aligned along those on those lines. Yeah.
I've got Jill, then Tina, then Ruth, then Jonathan. Jill?
Okay, it's similar type areas, I suspect. So Anthony may want to go round.
We'll take if it's helpful, we'll take independent members' comments and then give you free rein. Okay.
My question was, I was scrabbling around the whole time for the delivery model, so I'm glad you've answered that because it was the detail that I've struggled with. So very quickly, 4 questions. The buy-in and alignment, I think it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? It has to be coordinated, so it has to reflect what's needed. So it was a little bit more than just the alignment for me. The second question was about mandatory, or is this just something that we offer? So is it a substitute? Is it additional? Is it mandatory for health boards and the professions? So I think that's really important. Otherwise,
She needs a pen.
we don't get the bite on it. The investment in terms of both revenue and capital, wondering about whether we can utilise any current budgets to think about whether that's needed. And the last one really was how it fits with our newly commissioned contracts, and is there any variation needed on those, or are they written in such a way that we can substitute or add or ask for? So I make them very brief, they're probably not understandable.
So we'll take Tina, and then you can answer, reflect on those two. Tina?
Thanks. I was quite excited by this paper and the way in which it's been put together. I also reflected a little bit on my own experience and where we're coming from with simulation. And I just wondered whether we could emphasize a little bit more around the impact in currency to the multi-professional team of this type of learning. So I couldn't get anywhere in the paper with regards to the standardization of assessments and whether this would be used as a skill-based assessment or whether this was a forerunner to the further assessment process. And I'm thinking conversations with you in the past about the Royal College of Surgeons doing multidisciplinary type of training and then issuing assessments based on each regulator output. I think if we're going to have currency and show cost efficiencies, which you outlined in ensuring cost effectiveness, and I do think how you're going to assess and maintain that currency and standardization, hopefully on my thread of where I'm coming to, is the cost benefit it's going to be to the organizations to utilize simulation and then marry that with a digital input, because using that modular approach and keeping abreast with all the different innovations will have a cost. And from my perspective, I'm really excited with what's there, but I couldn't find anywhere about the currency and standardization assessments.
Okay. Do you want to come back on those two inputs?
I will do. The major challenge is going to be reading my writing. In terms of the standardization, in fact, this is really, so we are working on this, and I didn't go into the detail, but when it comes to quality assurance, faculty development, we're working on a set of standards that will be adopted by everybody agreeing to adopt them within Wales. But those are going to be the set of standards that HEIW puts forward. Now, as an organization, we have to get buy-in from others, and that comes back to alignment, because we do not have the leaders to make this happen in all organizations across Wales. However, the simulation community is a tight-knit one. They are already working together and they're aligning their approaches already. So I hope that answers alignment. And there's much more that we can talk about around assessment, standardization of faculty, and assessment around those standards. That will appear in the plan of work for next year. So that I hope that answers a bit about the impact. As far as investment goes, I think there will have to be a business case that supports the plans for certainly the next financial year, depending on how we set our priorities in IFT, whether this is mandatory. So
yeah, it's me on this one. So just to share with members in terms of actually the use of simulation, simulation actually enhances practice placement opportunities actually when it comes to students. And I mean, I'm sure you'll be aware actually the NMC actually and the other regulators are actually looking into that. And there are specific standards in terms of the number of hours that your students actually go on placements, and therefore how they actually are enhance their learning through simulation. Actually, simulation actually should not replace practice placement, and that's quite a clear message is coming actually from our regulators and our registration bodies actually about that. But really, as when it comes to mandatory, it's about actually how it complements and enhances that learning, not about a replacement or a mandatory requirement.
Okay. you. Ruth and then Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks. It's sort of picking up bits that have already been touched on. It. One is about the work on outcomes. We're at the start of this in a sense, aren't we? This is an area that's going to grow, obviously. And now is the time to be proactive about outcomes and value because we will lose the baseline if we're not careful. So I just wanted to ask how we're thinking about that. And it links to the importance of the research and evaluation programme and not just letting that happen around us in a sort of random way, but being proactive and giving it shape. So I think it would be an ideal topic and theme for a serious effort around setting an agenda for R&D, research and development and evaluation. And we need to start it now.
Thank you very much.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Jay. One of my points to pick up on with that is around, when the system is designed that delivers all of this, I can see how all this hangs, and I share your excitement about this. I think this is an incredibly thoughtful piece of work. But when you list things like improving patient and service user safety experience and outcomes, that has to mean more than just a sentence in a strategy. And for a board, we have to evidence that this sort of work, in whatever financial investment may be required going forward, and certainly the investment we put into supporting individuals to develop and deliver this, we have to evidence what difference this has made. And I think it could be substantial. I can really see the benefit of this. But I think in evaluating this effectively, I think we will need to be very clear that it is making that discernible difference to outcomes. And if that can be, I'm sure there's work being done to attempt to frame all of that, which is what I would expect. But I think we just need to be aware of that, because the way it's written is terrific. But I think that evidence and that evaluating, understanding the impact is going to be important for both staff and
It's not as if they're interested in this, is it?
No, they're also using all. They're picking up on really important points, which I think is really, really important. That's why the designing future directions piece is in there. Some work has already started. It is early days in the delivery of simulation, but we must not do any new piece of work without looking at the impact and evaluating it. We must not. And I think that is certainly the ethos of the simulation team. That's also the message that we've been getting from the executive team. So that is the direction of travel.
Okay, well, look, what I'm hearing around the table is an enthusiasm and a support and a commitment for this simulation strategy. So the board has been asked to formally approve the All Wales simulation-based education and training strategy for the healthcare workforce. Can I ask you to approve, please?
yes.
Yeah, and I think you've had the clue that, that whilst we've approved the strategy, we're very interested in seeing how it goes. I think we would ask you to take back to everybody involved the board's congratulations on getting us to this point. I do like it when I hear that Wales is not just on board, but driving an agenda. I think there is a huge amount of improvement that can be driven and encouraged and supported through this. And I think that is so important to the role of health education and improvement Wales. So thank you, Anton, and thank you for your time and your leadership in this. Well done, you. So I think the executive support for this, I think, has been really well placed, and I encourage you to continue with it. So we're now moving on to agenda item 3.2, maternity and neonatal update. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch yn fawr for that. Many of you actually will actually, relating to actually previous conversations, many of you actually will actually read publications actually nationally around the standards of maternity and neonatal services in various locations across the UK. And what I've included actually in this particular report is the links where you can access those and actually see that. So this paper actually sort of describes the programme of work that we are undertaking in response to some of those, and actually how we support our sort of health services to improve the patient safety and quality of services to our population. And actually, some of those reports are quite difficult to read, I have to say. But what we've done is actually, in response to those reports, we have engaged actually very broadly actually with the health services and others across Wales in order to understand actually where we are and how we can support as HEIW to improve actually the services they provide. It's fair to say actually what I do describe actually in this report as well. It's a very busy landscape out there in Wales. There are a number of actually areas who are looking at maternity neonatal services. And what we did as HEIW was actually obviously engage with them to understand what their programs of work were, but then actually about sort of how do we actually do a bit more joined up thinking in order to be actually deliver things effectively, efficiently, and we don't actually duplicate the efforts in terms of actually what we are doing. So there is a maternity neonatal network across Wales. Welsh Government have also published a maternity and neonatal safety programme. And as well as that, obviously there are Chief Nursing Officer priorities, which do mention maternity and neonatal services as well. So this engagement has been actually quite extensive in coming together actually with the people who actually deliver these services. And we've done this actually through a workshop and effectively listened and actually challenged them to understand actually what would help them, what is it they're currently doing, and what could we do as actually a strategic health authority to actually undertake the education that they need. So what this paper describes is the start of that journey. The work programme will start, well, has started this year, but what we learn and what we find out from this year will bear fruit and actually will inform our strategic objectives going forward, because we do anticipate that we will find a lot more this year that we need to take forward actually in the forthcoming years as well. So I'll leave that actually as a paper to be read, and I'm happy to take any questions arising from it.
Welcome this very important paper. Are there any?
Yeah, just to build on what Lisa has said, I think that there are lots of different pieces of work going on. I think that is a risk. It's such an important area as this, that we do need to make sure we join those things up effectively and that things don't get lost in between pieces of work. So, best establishing a work programme around this is the start of us helping to coordinate some of that. I think the feedback from the people that were involved in the workshop was really positive. I felt that it was a very necessary conversation to be having, and we're really grateful for the support that we were offering to take forward those short-term priorities. And the thing that really came through, I think, from our perspective was we very much had it was a very much a multi-professional attendance. We had an in-person workshop and a virtual workshop, very multi-professional from all over Wales. But there were definitely some key themes, one of which was really supporting the multidisciplinary team, and that does come through all of the reviews that you will have read, but also supporting them with leadership and improvement, and really being a bit more radical around the shape of the workforce going forward as well. So I think really good, I think, that we started on this journey because it's such a key priority for the NHS and Wales.
Alex, can I just pick up on that very important point you made about minding the gaps? Who is holding the ring on the whole? Is it clear that there is someone who has got their arms around this? We've got our arms around this bit, but who has got their arms around the whole? Is there clarity?
There is a national maternity neonatal team network, and as I said, there is that piece of work with the Welsh Government, but this is actually where we are. Obviously, Alex actually chairs that, oversees that as chief exec. So this is actually where we are.
So who's the SRO?
Yes,
so I think we're in transition, if I'm honest. Yeah. I think the maternity and neonatal network is the delivery vehicle. The networks are going through a transition at the moment because of work associated with the National Clinical Framework and NHS Executive. I think that the Welsh Government has established a safety programme with Improvement Henry, which will happen over the next couple of months, and complete a diagnostic phase. I think the intention then is to integrate this into a proper work programme for next year. So I think the honest answer about where we're at the moment is that there are different pieces of work, but the intention is very much to integrate these all, probably in a manner similar to what we see in England, where there's an overarching transformation approach.
Can I ask that when those things are settled, that is formally reported back to the board, so that we understand as a board where this sits? And I think that's to be sure that we are minding the gap. Yeah, making assumptions as to what others are doing is always a challenge. So I think that's a really important principle.
And we can do that. I think it would be a very important principle that you just come out of the workshops as well. Sometimes to do lots of fraternity, actually separate to really intelligent.
Yeah.
And I think that was a strong message. It's come across to us from a number of arenas that TCD needs to join that. And it's pleasing to see it, and that's been joined up at the government level as well as across the landscape to Wales as well. So that's actually where that team concept has come through. So we're engaging with those various team members to understand what we can do now, because once again we're coming out of a very difficult COVID time, which is probably 13 years as well. But it's basically, and I think the key thing and the huge benefit that we're seeing is that we're engaging a clinician to come to work with us within HEIW to inform actually the programme going forward as well.
Okay. So can I ask if there are any questions or comments from board members? Tina?
Thanks. Just a couple of comments, please. One is in relation to independent midwifery, and because in relation to this, I get the impression that's coming through that an agency midwifery as well, in terms of their engagement and standards, and then to cross-reference that also to the neonatal network and the Royal College of Paediatrics and obstetrician and gynaecologist. I didn't see mentioned here, but I just wondered whether there's engagement there, especially about the Royal College of Paediatrics and the neonatal agenda.
And that's the membership that we saw attending the workshop. We had the neonatologists that you attended. They were so proactive in wanting to be involved and actually take this work forward. So yes, I can make reference to that as well.
And I guess the knock-on effect of that is and it's linked to your comment whether or not Chief Nursing Officer has responsible for midwifery, whether the professional advisor network from within Welsh Government actually links in with all the external standards, because we commission neonatal training in England, and to see whether it's reflective of the strategic intent that comes out of this from a Welsh perspective, because the high level of neonatal intervention is, I think it's Southampton, but it might be a couple other universities from that perspective. So to make sure that what we're putting out standards are compliant with Welsh Government requirements.
And of course, on the back of that, we have got the Chief Midwifery Officer now as well.
But it'd be important to have that documented here so that we're aware of that. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Jonathan?
Firstly, Chair, can I say that I'd like to echo your point about ensuring that there is robust leadership and ownership, because Lisa's paper alludes to this. There are so many things involved in getting this right that are reliant on others doing things as well. So clearly that stewardship, that leadership is going to be fundamentally important to making sure this all works at the same time, probably the same pace. I really welcome this report. It's good to see this piece of work being done. Two very, very quick questions. Lisa, in terms of the next steps, the attraction and recruitment bit. Obviously, we're very aware that the ability to attract, recruit people into our professions varies depending on which bit of the service we're looking at. In terms of promoting careers in perinatal teams for children and young people, just wondering if we're going to start to scope out what we think good would look like in terms of addressing the issue of recruitment. I'm pleased to see it as part of the Careersville work as well. That's excellent. There's reference to seamless workforce models, Chair. The commitment to reviewing the maternity and neonatal support worker workforce model. Just wondering why there is the need to review that. Is there something in the reviews, as part of the independent reviews of the Commission, that suggested that aspect of the workforce needed to be reviewed?
So the healthcare, it's not about review, it's about reviewing how they are taking it forward. So healthcare support workers is very, very well established, and it was exploring more opportunities of introducing actually that maternity support worker. I think actually some work has been done on it, but we can go further. But as well as that, we're also looking at not just maternity support workers, given actually where we are with this particular paper, in terms of maternity and neonatal, we are also going to go down the route of actually nursery nurses and how we can actually sort of introduce them into this arena as well. I think the feedback has been that there's more opportunity. So that's where we're going to be reviewing in terms of where are we, how many have we got, and what do we need to do to support that work going forward? Because it recognises actually that there are very specific standards there, very specialist skill sets. So how can we actually introduce that midwifery support workforce? There has been work done on it, but once again, it's refreshing, reviewing and driving that forward too. So absolutely, it's not about reviewing, why do we need it? Yes, we do need it, but how are we going to take it forward?
Okay, I'm going to bring this important discussion now to a close. I think that we've been asked to note the contents of the paper. I think we need to strengthen that. The board is very interested and notes the paper and its importance to improving the quality and maintaining the quality of care for neonates and mothers. I think that we can see the proposals. We are really interested in the progress and the development, but we're also interested in its connectivity to the wider approach to responding to the reports. And we would welcome, the board would wish to see be updated as to who is holding the ring on the whole system. And I would just say that this is an important part of HEIW's existence. The word improvement is there, and it's through education and training that we get sustained improvement. So and of course the leadership. So I think we play an important part in this, but it is a part. So thank you very much for that. So can I ask you to note and to support those recommendations?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. We're now going on to agenda item 3.3, which is a really important piece of work, which is the strategic workforce plan update. And you're taking us through this, Julie.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So this paper provides the board with an update on a substantial programme of work aligned to our statutory function of strategic workforce planning, as well as the commitments in our INTP and the workforce strategy for health and social care 2020 to 2030. It's the first time that we've actually brought together the plans as a single piece of work and presented and brought to board. So I would hope that colleagues have found it useful and informative. I won't go through the paper in detail, but just to highlight a couple of things. So we had extensive learning from the approach to the development of the mental health workforce plan. Colleagues have already discussed how well received that was and how actually the substantial engagement that we undertook during the development of that plan has put us in a really strong place for implementation. What it also did from a technical perspective was allow us to develop a systematic approach to future workforce plans, and I've set that out in the paper. We've got the mental health workforce plan that's been delivered. We've got 3 plans under development this year in line with the INTP and the workforce strategy. Nursing, dental and pharmacy. I've given you a bit of information on those. What I've also done is appended the scoping presentation for the nursing workforce plan, so you can get a feel for actually the sort of way that we work through these plans.
The paper also highlights the future work. So we've just had an item about maternity and neonatal, which is one of the areas that we're looking at. Obviously, we're doing that in the context of our resources for next year and our INTP. And so the areas that I flagged in the paper, we would be looking to take forward in the context of next year's business plan. I wanted to emphasise that this body of work is actually a really key area for us. I know we had a discussion at the start of the meeting about resourcing and making sure that the staff are there to deliver the development of these plans. So I just wanted to highlight one of the aspects of the paper, which is about the Assistant Director of Strategic Workforce Planning, which is a new role for us, alongside our new ways of working changes that the board was briefed on in September. We have actually strengthened our capacity to deliver. So we are building here a body of expertise in strategic workforce planning in line with our functions in this important area. I think my final point then would just be about, it's not just about the work that's being led from within this organisation, it's about how we work in partnership, and I think we've had evidence of that around the mental health plan. But additionally, it's about us upskilling the experts across NHS Wales. So we have established a workforce planning network, which is chaired from this organisation. We have invested money in every organisation to upskill their experts. We have also invested money in training non-workforce specialists in how to understand and to deliver basic workforce planning skills. So we are growing the range of people across the system who can do this work. Just in terms of then the risks, we have obviously we've got risks identified, costs identified in relation to each of the individual pieces of work, but we have pulled together some of the sort of key risks for us. So there is no point in doing this work if we don't do it in a way that's evidence-based or credible. We are seeing increasingly important workforce data intelligence and modelling, so we're looking at a different approach there, and we're investing in that through Sean's team and us working more closely together. Engaging our stakeholders and partners, if we don't do that, we'll get it wrong, so that's fundamental. I think the proof of the pudding is the work we've done already, both on the workforce strategy itself and the mental health plan. Being conscious about the financial climate that we're in at the moment, so looking for things that we can do within existing resources in the system, also being realistic about funding for new requirements, and then I touched on capacity. So that's a very quick run through where we are. It's been very useful for us as a team to pull this together into a single paper and to look at this as a programme of work. We are trying to manage it in a way that is systematic, so we're having an overview as well as the individual products. I think I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions, Chairman.
Right. Well, thank you, Julie, for the briefness, but also the detail in the presentation. Are there comments or questions from board members, please? Jill, John, and Ruth.
Thanks, Julie. I mean, this is a massive piece of work and sort of absolutely pivotal to why we're here in many respects. So I think it's absolutely key to our functions. So really pleased to see it on the agenda today. I had a couple of questions, just for clarity, I guess, and a couple were on the nursing plan. So, and I know that's an appendix, so is it okay to?
So I lead on that one. Yeah.
So are you going to talk to it separately, or shall I just? No. Okay. So in terms of the strategic workforce planning paper, I was just intrigued to know why we were just doing the priority need and not covering all areas. It just talks about the priority areas.
Okay. So, so the workforce strategy is total workforce for health and social care.
Yeah.
And within that, we identified there were some hotspot or priority areas where we know there are things that we need to do on a uniprofessional basis or a service basis, and that's what these plans represent.
That's good. Very quick question: have we seen the social care plan that's referred to in there?
Yes. Yes, so there's a social work one, and they've also done one for direct care workforce. And we've seen both of those.
And in terms of the nursing plan, I guess it's about a lot of this is about resources, isn't it? And what resource we're likely to have available to us. So, and you mentioned workforce information. So when we assess demand for any of these areas, is that based on true need? Will it be based on true need, or will it be based on, dare I say, the budget in the organisations? And will we be able to have, that's what we really need, and this is what we're going to end up with.
So this links out, if you pick up on my nursing workforce plan, actually, as you can see it, you what Julie's putting that in there, that's part of our strategic objectives, 1.2, developing that nursing workforce plan was a key objective. So the resource underneath that, actually, I mean, the component that relates to actually Julie's work is that demand supply modelling, which is helping us to do that. So alongside that, I've got a team that undertakes that piece of work as well. So in actually determining our strategic objectives, we've looked at what our capacity is, and actually obviously afforded the resource in order to take this work forward. This is the piece of work that we're doing this year, because that's the immediate priorities. As a result of the intelligence that we will gather, there will be that work going forward as well. But that's specific to the nursing workforce plan, and pharmacy and dental likewise have got other different leads that taking forward those pieces of work too. Does that answer your question, Jo?
Julie?
So just to clarify, there's a modelling tool that's been developed based on a prototype done in HEIW. That has been refined by the Workforce Planning Network across Wales, which has got reps on all organisations that we chair. That is being rolled out in every organisation, is being completed. It's being completed by the workforce information managers. It'll be sense checked by the workforce directors and by the directors of nursing, and that information will then be collated. What we don't know, because obviously we receive the information and we use it, is the extent to which that reflects establishment control, because that doesn't exist everywhere. So it'll be as accurate as it can be, but it won't be, the sort of thing that we would hit our money on. So it would need to be modelled.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Again, just to echo some of Jill's points around whether coming in the paper around this recognising that this is absolutely core to our business as an organisation. I welcome the conversation around us adopting a more robust methodology to our workforce planning. We recognise that needs to be much more robust, and we need to be more scientific in the way that we're doing that. And again, it's good to hear that we've got the expertise in order to do that and work with partners. Can I just question, in terms then of the workforce plans that we've got, I'm presuming that we will be able to demonstrate clear outcomes from those plans and then use those outcomes to advise Welsh Government on what is needed within the system.
Yes. Absolutely. And
That's a very important point, John.
Yeah. And if I pick up on that, that's quite important to do that. So from the outset, with regards to steering group, Welsh Government is on that steering group. So therefore they can see what we're doing, they're engaged from the outset, as well as actually other partnerships as well. So they're there.
I just think it's clear for us as a board that we're providing that intelligence in terms of what they can expect of us.
Okay, I've got Ruth, then Tina, and then John.
Right. Thank you. I just think this is really helpful. It's just so helpful to see the structure and to know that there's consistency across it. The point I wanted to pick up was the suggestion that there may be an opportunity for stakeholder reference groups for each of these. If that's the case, based on experience with the mental health workforce plan, there's going to be one enormous amount of work. I just wonder if there's any better way of handling those stakeholder forums, and they're potentially hugely valuable to us. And over time, we might build up quite a substantial network that way. But I just wouldn't underestimate the amount of effort that would require.
I think it would be a mistake to duck that effort.
So,
Well,
so the way we're set up at the moment is almost like a hub and spoke model. So we have a central team that sits with me that is actually providing the expertise and the support and hand-holding. But across the business areas, depending on the professional area, we have people, as Lisa said, leading on the particular plans. So wherever possible, we are using the existing stakeholder engagement arrangements in those areas. It's not central. It comes together in a central way through the work we do on the workforce strategy. So we would report it through there, but also through our own stakeholder reference group. But we are trying to do each of these through our networks that exist. But engagement is such a huge part of it that it is with that effort. But you are right, it is a good job.
well, and I would totally support that, and it's just useful to know that there is someone like bringing it together. And it's something that maybe in time, the stakeholder reference group itself might want to be aware of.
Tina,
I've got a few comments really. One in relation to Jill's point where you're trying to look at the workforce planning, the data and all of that coming together. I think one of the reasons that the nurse staffing said that come in was to try to put some criteria around that, around the acuity of the client base, professional judgment and the establishment control. And in those areas, we should be able to use that modelling as to where the workforce plans are right, because they're accountable and there is an electronic database. Whether there's a financial implication and how Hereford boards respond to that on the recruitment agenda, we should then be able to cross-reference that to areas of agency expenditure and need. The bit for me in this is, where does the third sector and social care requirement needs for those professional groups and healthcare support workers coming into the overall INGPs that come from health boards? Because often you assume that they're using the same data for measuring the requirement of recruitment, and they're not. And that's the subsequent problem when we're then challenged about how we workforce plan, is that we go on the INGPs that come forward, which have a variation in standards for how they do the assessments of all their professional health groups. And we picked it up in an earlier area where we were looking at occupational therapists, that maybe local government want more occupational therapists than maybe the NHS are actually planning for. So I just wonder whether there's an opportunity here, Julie, to look at a standing agenda item on the National Partnership Forum and the Partnership Council, where we actually give regular updates of the successes that we're achieving with the data that we've got and how we're taking things forward, and then actually getting the Partnership Forum to act, because they will have links to cross-reference all of those sectors, to be able to comment in a partnership way that helps us actually see whether the data we're receiving to do these workforce plans going forward. I just wonder whether, Alex, we'd be keen as an organisation to try and negotiate that there is a standing partnership forum agenda item to look at the implementation of our workforce planning based on the local partnership agenda, which approve their INGPs that come forward to us. The accountability lies with the health boards and the partnership at that level, but bringing it into a national remit where we can then actually present and they can give information back. Because I think one of the criticisms we might be having here is the ever-increasing agency expenditure, whether it's for medical practice or whether it's for nursing practice or whatever. And that's seen as maybe not giving the continuity of service and also the quality of service, because you're changing your workforce agenda so quickly. I said quite a lot, but what I'm saying is the bigger picture here is we get good stakeholder reference group consultation, we get the workforce plans, but actually some of the partnership skill sets that take place at local level will hopefully challenge the INTP workforce plan. So when they come to national level, they should have agreed them. And therefore, if we have access to that communication, then we're all working partnerships in a better way. Thanks.
So I'm going to suggest, if it's okay, that we just bring in Sean for a moment, but I'll just say one thing before that, if that's okay. So I think that crosses a lot of agendas, and I think it's probably worth us having a data conversation separately to this, because we've really got time to go into it today. But there are different approaches for different areas, and some of that work is being led by Welsh Government, some of it's in our remit. So I think it's definitely, you raised some really good issues, but I think probably we need to have a bit of a longer conversation just to unpack that a bit. But Sean, do you want to say something?
Agreed, and pick that up offline to really understand how we benefit from that insight really and take something forward. But just to give assurance to the board, we're doing a lot of work on the data. So we're starting to work with an external company now to build our demand model, because we've done quite well on supply. So we agreed in executive team this week to go out and hold a demand modelling exercise that gets built for us. We're also working with KPMG, who've done this for some of the English regions, and they demand. So it's always going to be a bit of compare and contrast into building something, but also bringing in the KPMG work, what that looks like. We're also recruiting an assistant director now of data and analytics for the first time to the organisation, and he will bring a wealth of modelling experience. He led the modelling through COVID, and whilst workforce data is not his strong point, in previously it will be, I think, a very interesting way of bringing that skill set in, and then having a real deep dive into what we would expect to be available and what is actually available. The other part that's going on in that is the review then of the work around, can we rely on the ledger of vacancy information? And that's a conversation that's being explored. But I think the answer, which you alluded to, Joe, would be it'll be one measure, and then your point, Tina, to be set against other understanding, other triangulation of data, so that we can put it against an opinion versus the ledger, because we know that probably that's not always the total requirement of the board. So I think there's a lot of individual pieces happening at the moment on the data. It's got a lot more coverage, workforce data, both nationally and in our organisation. So I think over the course of the rest of this year and into next year's ICP.
Internationally, it's a big, big subject.
Can I just clarification? So do we actually have access to the data that's required under legislation for nurse staffing? And the commissioning process there, would we be able to have access to that?
I don't think it's actually a source that we're providing. We do have access to it. Have we built it into our model in the way that you're describing? No, probably not yet. And that's the bit that we've got to get fast to manage.
Next, Jeff.
You want to come on? Those one.
I think what I'm getting out of the conversation is I need to explain that this is a different way of getting underneath some of the assumptions that are coming into our education training plan.
Yes.
So by taking a deep dive, say, on the nursing workforce, what we need to understand is, and we need to bring some transparency to this, because if we don't bring some transparency to what we're trying to do, then we don't ever know whether we've done it to do it. So I suppose from my sort of simplistic view is trying to assess what is the gap we've currently got that is leading to that significant agency bill, the safety issues, the workforce burnout at the moment. And what do we think that gap is now, and what could that gap be in the future? And then to look at, okay, we've got education and training pipeline. How will that pipeline meet some of that gap over the next couple of years? But equally, the other three quadrants of supply, which is recruitment, and in this case, probably if we're taking nursing, we'd be looking at the international recruitment, retention, what are we doing to retain staff, but also redesign. So that might be, for example, where we look at the support workforce, because we know that band 4 percentage of that workforce is very low currently. And then in the iterative process, we say, well, actually, these are our current plans in those areas. This is what we think the gap is. Is that enough? Or do we need to go back to those plans now and reduce etc. And actually then, what happens to the gap? And if we can't get rid of the gap, well, what else do we need to do? So I think it's about initiating a process of transparency about the gap in the workforce, and about having a collective effort then in terms of, well, how do we address that gap? Because we can't just let there be a gap permanently, and that might lead to incremental change or transformational change. So, and I think the important thing about that is also recognising that we don't have a crystal ball for the future. So one of the important bits of expertise we need as an organisation is access to scenario planning and modelling, because there isn't one version of the future, as we all know. That would be lovely, wouldn't it, if we could just say that's exactly where we're going to be this time. But we know that, yes, we could have planned to do more of the same, or we could plan that actually technology is going to help, or we could plan that actually there's another part of the workforce that could help, or we could plan that patients' needs are going to change, or this is going to really transform everything. So I think that scenario planning and that ability to look at different versions of the future and use that to plan towards, but not to a decimal point, to keep that flexibility built into our plans, is what we're trying to do through this, so that there will then be a beneficial link back into the education and training plan, because that will be informed by a more comprehensive view of what all those other things are that need to go on in terms of supply, rather than just a reliance at the moment on what we know is probably lots of teams being very busy and doing workforce planning on top of lots of other things, and probably not getting into the level of detail that we want to. So I think this is an opportunity to do that deep dive. I think the nurse staffing levels work is really important in terms of providing us with those principles that we can use to inform the model, both in terms of the ones that are already in legislation and the ones that aren't, because that does give us a set of resources and guides that we can use, because this work for nursing, if we're talking about that one in particular, is across all four fields of nursing, not just the nursing, the adult nursing that's already subject to parts of the Act. So I don't know whether I've kind of explained that to sort of help really join up the questions that have been asked, really, because I think, and it is a journey, I think we would have to recognise that because of the deficits in some of the data, that has sort of held us back from, certainly in the mental health workforce plan, that's the bit that we haven't been able to do yet, is really project forward that 10 to 15 year, what are the different scenarios, and therefore what additional actions does that try. But that's certainly, again, a piece of work that we're looking to take forward. So I'm not stopping there, I might confuse.
I don't think it's confusing. I just think it's a recognition that this is a complex area, and I know of nowhere that has finessed it. And if there were, they would probably be, what's the name of that guy who wrote that book about the future in the 16th century? Nostradamus. I mean, think the wit of Nostradamus to write it, and they'll only be proven correct by retrospective stuff. Tina.
There was one other thing, Alex, it's about engagement with the Welsh Partnership Forum, because often they have the local knowledge of the challenges as well. And if they can share that with us and we can share where we're going, then it's almost like a second and third picture of what they're experiencing, because they will have an all-Wales picture. And it would be very useful for us to fill that gap.
What is underlined for me, I'm going to bring this to a close now, but what's underlined for me is we've set up a set of principles on the way we work, and partnership is core to that. And in this report, which I think the board has certainly noted, and I think the board's asked to note the paper for assurance, I think we can see a way forward, recognizing we're in, we've maybe got to base camp, right? Or we're well on our way to there and establishing it. But the importance of that methodology about using our partnerships to get not just knowledge and data, but also commitment and leadership. So I think there is a multiple triangulation going on here. And I think if you miss out on any of those steps, in my mind, you could go down a blind ending diverticulum and we all know that leads to disrepute. And the future, of course, is tomorrow's present. And that is something that politicians will be acutely aware of. So I'm asking you, please, to note the paper for assurance. Can I have your approval for that?
Yes.
And you can tell that the board we're all very interested and we're in this together. So thank you for that, Julie. And with that, we'll move swiftly on to 3.4.
We will, and I do have slides, Gemma, but I am conscious of the time. So I don't know if you want me to stand up and.
I think it would be really a mistake not to do the presentation. Are board members okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to go over time on this board, but I think yeah. Do you know the Christopher Columbus planning cycle? He knew where he was. He didn't know where he was going. When he arrived, he didn't know he'd arrived. When he left, he didn't know where he'd been, but he did it all on borrowed money. Yeah.
Doesn't look quite right, does it? No. Try again.
That's the Christopher Columbus business plan. Yeah.
It's not in the downloads.
We've got the slides, haven't we? Have we got the slides in front of us?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to start?
Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks everybody. So the purpose of this session is just to give you a snapshot of where we are on implementing the workforce strategy for health and social care. This is the second year anniversary. It was at the end of October since we published the workforce strategy in the midst of the pandemic. The snapshot I'm going to give you is going to be through the health or the HEIW lens. We have got a joint report in preparation with Social Care Wales, which will articulate what's been done by both organisations to date. But for today, because we were just quite keen to bring this here and share with you sort of the progress, we're giving you insight into the health activity so far. Okay, so am I going that way? Yes, I am. Right, okay. So I've just mentioned that we published this piece of work in 2020 in the midst of the global pandemic. It was the largest ever engagement exercise done on the health and social care workforce in Wales. It was huge, and we did that in genuine partnership. We went back around the loop several times, so we asked people what they thought. We did interviews. We actually did a huge amount of engagement, and we came out with a draft strategy in December 2019 in line with one of the directives from the ministers at that time. We submitted it to government, and they sat on it for a little while, and then as COVID began to take hold, we realised that actually the strategy could help with the response to the pandemic, and so we agreed with ministers that we would publish it in October 2020. Just a quick reminder of the strategy. So it's 7 themes: well-being, Welsh language, culture, and inclusion right at the heart of the strategy. So this is basically how it's set out. So it's a 10-year strategy, 7 themes. And what we did was we broke it down into 3 phases. So the first phase, 3 years, then we've got another 3 years, and then 4 years at the end. And what we agreed was that both organisations would work together in parallel for the first phase, because obviously to suddenly do everything jointly is quite a challenge, and we knew there were quite big differences in the systems, so we needed to actually build up to that. So for the first phase, we've been working in parallel, and I'll give you some examples as we go through. For phase 2, which would commence in October next year, we would see things being done increasingly jointly, and then by the time we get to phase 3, we would realise those ambitions, which is to have a health and social care workforce which is seamless. So that's basically the premise of where we're going. So this is my assessment, having talked to my colleagues in here and actually gone through all of the actions. So I would say for where we are now, which is the end of the second year of our first favoured 3 years, that there's been good implementation progress. I think we are, no, I don't think, I believe that we are still satisfied that we're going to get where we wanted to get to by 2030. So that's my bottom line in terms of our performance. What I would say is the context is way more challenging than when we started. We did engage on this plan in 18, 19 and early 20. We took the decision that it remained evidence-based and valid in 2020 and we published it. But things have changed quite enormously. And I would say those actions in here for those first 3 years, which will have an impact, but particularly around the first theme, which is motivated, engaged, healthy workforce, that is severely impacted by the climate that we're living in. And we've heard about some of that today. Things like the financial context, you know, staff well-being, burnout after COVID, and those sorts of things. So we can carry on doing the things that we're doing because they're the right things to do, but we are also cognizant of the fact that the world is changing around us. So I think that is an issue. I think the other thing is this growing appetite for short-term fixes. And there's something about us holding our nerve with Social Care Wales and pushing on with this piece of work because it is the right stuff to do and it remains the right stuff to do. So that would be my kind of overview and my message to the board today. So for those who like numbers, we've done a very quick table that just shows you where we are, and I know you've had that in your pack, so I won't dwell on that. There are some actions in here that, with the benefit of hindsight 3 years on, we probably would draft them differently. So the chairman and I had a conversation about this yesterday. There are a handful of actions in here that are open-ended. So if I give you an example, it says that education and learning meets the needs of health and social care. So we've done a lot of that through the new contracts, but actually, will that ever be met? Probably not, because the needs of health and social care are constantly changing. So for phase 2, we will be much more sophisticated about the way we describe our actions. So there is a start, a middle and an end. And that's just some learning through the process. So just going through them briefly, the themes in terms of where we are. So I've mentioned this one as being the one that I'm probably most worried about, not in terms of the things that we said we were going to deliver, because we are making good progress on those, but because this is the area where actually, you know, the factors that are going on in the world around us will impact mostly on staff, but it is really important to carry on. What I can say is in relation to the first area, which is health and wellbeing and staff governance frameworks, that we're working very closely with health and with social care on that. And so both sectors do now have those things in place. The staff survey next year will be fundamentally different to what we've had. We've had a boom and bust in terms of staff survey across NHS Wales, with, I think, ministers sort of choosing to have various different approaches. We've agreed in partnership to use the learning from the England survey, where they've got 18 years of consistent data. And we've also agreed to embed compassionate and wellbeing measures in the survey for the first time. So we will be able to evaluate some of the things we're doing and how the sector is feeling. This one here, which is work towards fair reward and recognition across health and social care, you're aware of the industrial action and the issues around pay and cost of living. And so that is where we're at on that. Okay, so National Health and Careers Service, we've got all the foundations in place for that. We're making good progress there. Again, you know, there are some work there that is led by other partners, including Welsh Government, direct incentives, bursaries, things to make the service attractive to recruit into. There's work going on around modern values-based recruitment processes in both sectors, but as colleagues will know, there isn't a single approach to recruitment in social care, so there is quite a bit to do in that area. One of the things to shout out there is the careers bill, which I know we've mentioned earlier on in the conversation, and the fact that we were able to sort of show huge appetite for that resource, and we continue to develop it. So just moving on then, multi-agency professional models. This is where we've mentioned the mental health and primary care workforce plans. There's work around extended and advanced practice skills, the common induction programme, and then governance and regulation. So some of these areas are yet to start, or they're early days, work in progress. But again, they remain valid and the right things to do. Digital is one of the areas which I know Sean has previously presented on a digital strategy and what our thoughts are around our role, working in partnership with HEIW and others across the sector. And we've got some very clear deliverables there, and we're quite comfortable that those will be delivered by the end of the 3 years. in terms of where we need to get to and what we said that we would do. Education and learning is a huge part of our agenda within HEIW, and so we've started to make progress around some of these specifics, but there are more to do. So the work-based learning, for example, and flexible delivery, we've got stuff on that in our IMTP this year, and that is going to be a key feature for next year. But that is one of the things that we're hearing through all of the work we're doing on the workforce plans as being really, really important. Interestingly, flexibility, opportunities for CPD, flexible delivery of learning is something that's coming out very strongly through the Wales Partnership Forum. And at the meeting that we had, the national one last week, there was a lot of discussion about this. So there's a lot of links between some of the work that we're doing and actually, you know, what's coming through the Partnership Forum engagement that we're supporting. Leadership is probably our most complete area of all of the themes. I was tempted to tick the third deliverable there as actually been achieved, but I can't do that honestly because we have got the infrastructure in place to deliver a pipeline, but we don't yet have a talent management pipeline. So having exec development centres in place that can enable us to identify the right people and then build programmes around them would be really important. But we are really on course with our compassionate leadership agenda. The big challenge for us now is how do we get that into the DNA of the system, into the culture, into each organisation. So we are supporting at the moment Professor Michael West to go out and deliver a session in every board in Wales to actually talk to them about how they can actually embed compassionate leadership. We're also doing some bespoke work with 2 or 3 of the organisations that have asked for support in helping mainstream compassionate approaches within their organisations. So we see this as absolutely fundamental to creating the right conditions and the culture for staff to want to stay and work in the NHS. It's not just about leadership, it is actually about the environment and how people feel and are treated. So big piece for us to do there in terms of embedding, but we are, as I say, on course for that. And then our final theme is workforce supply and shape. And we've talked a little bit there about workforce intelligence and the real importance of that area, the data, having a data strategy, building our capacity and capability. We've rolled out what we said we'd roll out, but obviously that's not the end of the discussion. We've done what we said we would do, but actually there's a lot more to do to make sure that people are using those workforce planning skills and that we really do get better at workforce planning as a system. The work around contribution of volunteers and carers, that actually did come up in the Wales Partnership Forum last week as well. We were discussing that, and in the presentation I gave there, I was asked a question. So I think there is concern that actually volunteers might be seen as a substitute for substantive workers. So we were able to give the assurance that this is about additionality. And we have reached out to WCBA. Social Care Wales are actually in discussion with the carers organisations, and we'll bring that work together in 2023. Okay, so just a slide, very quick slide on wellbeing, inclusion and Welsh language. It is everywhere throughout. We do actually, if you look at the compassionate leadership principles, at the teachings of Michael West, you'll see that inclusion and wellbeing are absolutely at the heart of that approach. So a lot of the work that we're doing there is supporting it. I think the lesson again from the first phase is that we do need to pull out specific actions. So I think it's great to say that it's embedded, but actually there's a big appetite for us to have, you know, separate actions. So that's something we've agreed with Social Care Wales, that we will articulate some specific goals around this area. We can't forget the government's action plans in relation to anti-racist Wales or the Welsh language, Nigeria. So we need to sort of pick those up as well. They are in our IMTP, but they need to be explicit, I think, in the strategy going forward. And then just some risks and issues. So maybe if I start at the bottom first, so joint working, obviously you'll be aware of the document that was recently published by the expert group around towards a national care service. That does have some references in there to the role of Social Care Wales, the partnership with ourselves, and also the shape of the care system and the national infrastructure. So there's a lot of, I suppose, change, potentially transformation and disruption in the system, and that can, you know, take people's eye off the ball in terms of joint working. So that's just a reference to that. Delivery phase 1 was about both organisations leading the work and getting on with stuff that they could get on with in the midst of the pandemic and making, you know, some impact. Phase 2 has got some big ticket items in there like parity of esteem and equity and fair reward and recognition. So we will require a different approach for phase 2. And we will need to put in place different oversight arrangements and governance and stuff like that. Engagement and buy-in we've already talked about in the context of the previous paper. That is so vitally important. If we don't take people with us, then these things will just stay on the shelf. So that's really important, but that does take time. And obviously at the moment, the focus is on the immediate. The funding outlook we've kind of rehearsed, and then the interface. So members of the board will be aware that the Minister has signalled her intention to produce a national workforce implementation plan. We don't know exactly the content of that at the moment or the timing for publication, but inevitably that will have an impact and then an interface with the work that we're doing. So we really need to sort of explore that a little bit more to understand the links between our work and that work that's being led through Welsh Government. So those are the sort of risks and issues at the moment. And then just what next? So we're working on detailed analysis and a formal report for the end of phase 2. We're going to step up the governance arrangements from January. So we have a monthly meeting at the moment. We're going to put some project and programme management in place now for the last 11 months of phase 1, and that will set us up nicely then for phase 2, because we'll have those things in place and we'll have done a dry run. And we're going to have our JET, our joint exec team meeting on 9th of December, where we'll be updating on this. And as I say, we need to give further consideration to the interface with the Minister's plan. So that's it.
Thank you, Julie. I think it's been very worthwhile having this presentation. Can I ask the board for questions or comments? Jill?
Sorry, operations. It was really worthwhile having that presentation because it's a great reminder of that huge piece of work and where we are on it. So thank you for that, because I think it was really very, very helpful in terms of reminding us what we set out to do. And it is a 10-year plan. When all said and done, we are only a small way into it. But I suppose when I read the slides, I was full of enthusiasm and then abject pessimism, I suppose, at the same time, in terms of where we go next. And I suppose the obvious question is phase 2, how we deliver it. Do we need to change things or leave that hanging? But it reminded me as I went through the slides of what we have achieved. And I think the most important thing is that we let people know what we've achieved in this. And I would like to see a really big comms around where we are. Thanks to all our partners as well, because we haven't achieved it on our own. And maybe that could form quite a piece of the JET meeting in terms of our impact and achievements, and leading into how we are able then to take things to forward. I feel like it's very big uphill.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Jill. I think that's very, really important that we do promote all the good work that lots of people have done to deliver so far. I suppose what we just need to be cognizant of, and I know that you are, is that we haven't solved all the workforce problems. So it's maintaining that balance, that we recognise that some of the ongoing work still needs to unlock some of those problems. So in particular, the last item on losing workforce, obviously a priority in workforce strategy, and we haven't solved that problem yet, but we are on to it, and that's part of the work programme. So yeah, I think it's just making sure we don't give the impression that we think we're home and dry, because clearly the workforce pressures are still very much there. And you know, inevitably some of these actions do take some time to bear fruit. They're not overnight sensations. They do need to be, you know, properly grafted in, and they do need a lot of work from people to make sure that they deliver success. But yeah, totally support the ethos of what you just said.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie, for the presentation. I guess it reinforces what we know we're doing around workforce planning and our strategy for that with clear timelines. What I'm not so aware of is the Minister's workforce implementation plan. You did note that at the end of your last slide. So can I just ask what considerations have been given to the interface between the work that we're doing and this other piece of work?
Thanks, John, and thanks for the positive feedback. I think that's a really good question. At this point in time, we haven't seen the draft implementation plan, and we're not clear on timescales. So it's difficult to know what the interface will be. I think that's the honest reflection on it. What we do know is the stuff that we've articulated in the workforce strategy and the stage that we're at with preparation for phase 2 is evidence-based and is based on a lot of engagement. And for phase 2, we ran a series of events through the summer. We had over 600 people engage with us. They told us what they think we should be focusing on next. So we're clear, we're getting on with our plans, but obviously we just need to watch and see what's emerging from government.
Well, I think it's important for us as a board that we're actually proactive in that space.
Well, John, I'm going to write to the Minister and share the progress so far based on the information that we've had, and I'm going to request a meeting with the Minister in order so that we can appropriately ensure alignment with her ministerial priorities and this piece of work. And I will do that after this meeting.
A couple of very quick points, Chair. Firstly, I very much welcome this coming to board. I think it is a strategy that we have written in conjunction with Social Care Wales and in consultation with many other people. Having a joint workforce strategy of this type, I think, is exactly the direction of travel. And I think Julie's right that when you say, we're setting out now this is a long-term strategy to get us to where we need to be, recognizing that there are those things that will come at our organisations and our services at different times. Strategically, this is the direction of travel, and it makes sense. So I need to get, firstly, the update on where we are in the first phase is really helpful. It shows the value, the activity, the impact that we're having. I think the review of that will be incredibly important. So when that review comes to our board and Social Care Wales, I would really encourage colleagues to think about not just the really good things that have happened and the way in which they have occurred, but perhaps where there have been challenges in delivering what we've hoped we would deliver, but also in that reflecting on the new environment that we now face and some of the challenges that may present to how the next phase is delivered. Because whilst I absolutely sign up to the direction of travel, there may be some things that might need to be flexed. Maybe one or two of the actions may need to be done in different ways, perhaps, or with different emphasis. Strategically, I know we're heading the right way, but it's just where we are now is very different to where we were when the report, when the plan was written. And I think reflecting on that as we then plan for that next phase is going to be quite crucial. But it's superb to see this, and I think it does show, once again, Chair, the value of what we can do in partnership with organisations like Social Care Wales. And if we are committed across all of our health and social care services to doing more in innovative and creative ways, particularly around the integration of services, delivering more in the community where it has a greater impact for people, then delivering the next bit around comparative esteem, recognising the value of all of our workforce will be even more important if we start to see teams being integrated in the future, because people need to feel that they're being treated with the same level of respect and professionalism and reward and support that recognises their impact as much as anybody else in the system. I think all of this makes a massive contribution to that.
I'll just respond to that. I think that's a really important point, because the work that we've been doing on the increase in community care capacity for this winter has absolutely demonstrated that without some of those big shifts, we're just really playing around with lectures. You know, we're working around it rather than properly looking at integrated models. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to, you know, keep that vision in mind, because that's really where we'll get the benefits for the people using our services at the end of the day.
And then, you know,
It's just a small point in relation to how we go forward from here. One of the messages I picked up from the stakeholder reference group was about the visibility and commitment to our golden threads, just where they are. And I think if we are moving forward, we need to bring them right to the front, so that there's absolutely no doubt about where our commitment is.
very helpful. Yeah.
Just listening to the discussion, I also wonder about the unintended consequences that we weren't aware of and that we are now aware. I can pick up on Jonathan's point where he says important to look at the care in the community and delivering for the community. But when you look at the current challenges of cost of living and trying to discharge somebody into an environment where they can't keep warm, they can't have the resources to care for themselves. So there are certain impacts that we're not necessarily aware of when we did this plan. And I just wonder whether it would be helpful from a government perspective where presumably the National Workforce Implementation Plan that we haven't had sight of actually clearly outline the government responsibilities and the changes that have occurred since we put this plan together with regard to Brexit and the impact on the international recruited workforce, the longevity of the Home Office challenges with regards to the requirement for people coming and living in a professionally qualified workforce, the salary bands that they're going to achieve in order to remain and have the freedom to remain. So I think there are issues that when we developed our plans that subsequently might need an update in cross-referencing that to the strategic intent of the national government, UK government, and also the Welsh government, because that has an effect not just in Wales, but across the UK and the international recruited workforce. And I think where we are is that listening to the stakeholder reference group and individual responses about how the engagement of this organisation has been in trying to get the workforce plans right, and the recruitment and retention of staff is not just down to a single organisation such as ourselves, which is why I still go back to the fact that I think we should have a standing agenda item on the National Partnership Forum so that we can make the changes that we're currently delivering on, and also how that's reflected on the Partnership Council and maybe across organisational health and social care to take ownership of those unintended consequences that were not there when we developed our plan. I'll stop now because I'm on a mantra, but I really passionately believe that we can only deliver within the resources that we are aligned to have.
Just to assure you that Alex and I are standing members of the Wales Partnership Forum, we're employer representatives, so not necessarily from HEIW, and we have had an item on the workforce strategy and deliverables at each of the last 5 meetings. It meets 3 times a year, so we are in there every time.
And that's been accepted.
Yeah.
Okay. So I still would like clarification then, if you are requesting a meeting and there's an independent member of this board, how we actually have a national workforce implementation plan that we have not had sight of, yet we're engaged at that level, because that gives a problem to us.
So this is a very timely presentation for all sorts of reasons. I think it's really good for the organisation to see where it's set out and what it's achieved so far, and to recognise some of the challenges and the learning on this journey. I think the fact this is a health and social care plan, right? I think we need to have a proper discussion when we see the combined report of the health and social care, because we're seeing one monocular view at the moment. I think there's a widespread recognition that has been exaggerated at this time of the importance and interdependency of health and social care to the well-being, safety and quality of care for patients and citizens. for me, we've receiving this report. That sounds very minimum, right? The word just receive. I think we're receiving and we're taking action following this receiving this report. And those actions are, we need to explore how we send the message about the progress. We need to clarify the interface between this and the minister's implementation plan. And I think we need to review, as we get close to phase 2, what and renew what the new world challenges are in what appears to me to look like a period of financial and service challenge, which will be longer than just 2 years by the look of it. So we've got a lot of work to do, and above all, I would emphasize the strength of doing things in partnership with people to support people and to be the best of partners. So for me, Alex, I think it's an enormous challenge, but I really thank you for this, for bringing this today. And I think it was precise and very, very well focused. So can I move us on? I intend to ask if you want to have a comfort break after the next item, bearing in mind that we have we are going to go over time, but I think the time has been well spent. So I'm moving us rapidly on to integrated medium-term plan update. I'll remind us that we did have a good presentation and debate about this at our recent board development session. So no pressure. Yeah.
So the paper provides an update on the development of the strategic framework for the INTP for 23 to 26. And we did present some of this in the board development session last month. So as already mentioned today, we haven't received the planning guidance as yet. We are expecting it any day. So we've done an awful lot of work in anticipation of that. So the paper sets out the proposed vision, purpose and value statement, and the review of our framework in terms of the strategic aims and objectives would mean that we would go down from our 6 strategic aims to 3 that are set out in the paper. And the purpose of this is to provide sort of the clarity on exactly what the organisation is trying to achieve, so that we can achieve greater integration across our business units. So we are working in that multi-professional way to improve our performance management and enable the identification of key performance indicators for each area. So the strategic aims and objectives are set out on page 3. I'm going to sort of read those out in detail. The enabling plans then support the achievement of those sort of strategic aims and objectives. And on page 4, we've detailed our assessment and description of what is included in those enabling plans. We have already done sort of quite a bit of communication and engagement on this emerging strategic framework. We've taken this to the stakeholder reference group. There are engagement sessions happening with health boards this month and into next month. So we will be able to feed all of the aspects that come out of that into our plan and make sure that we've put those golden threads through everything that is included in it. And then just set out towards the back is a revised timeline of when we'll be able to bring these pieces of work back to board. So in January we will have a first draft of our plan, our emerging plan, and then we are anticipating that the planning guidance will indicate the submission date has to be the 31st of March, and we've been informed that that is. Okay.
Thank you, Rihanna. Thank you. Are there any comments, questions? I think I'm going to ask the board at this point then to note the vision, purpose and value statement. Note the strategic aims, strategic objectives and enabling plans. and note the revised timeline, which accounts for a revised submission date of the 31st of March 2023. And I would like to add the board's recognition of the work, both the intensity and the focus that's been brought to bringing this plan, this methodology together. Okay, thank you very much. Now, we are going to be going over by around about another 30 to 35 minutes by my calculation. And I'm aware that we need to resolve to go into in committee. So can I please, and that won't be a long session, so can I please suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break? I calculated it is now 1:10 Can I ask everybody to be back, and we'll continue at 1:15. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome back. We're now going on to the part 4, and that's the governance, performance and assurance. So 4.1, HEIW Integrated Performance Report, September 2022. Thank you for the report, Rhiannon.
So the second performance report of the year has been shared. We obviously had a good discussion on this in the last board development session, so we hopefully have reflected some of those requests for information in the performance report. But as described before, we are refreshing the performance framework. So if it's not there now, we will be working towards taking all of that on board and informing the revised performance framework going forward. So we addressed in the report our accountability conditions, because this is the performance report that will form the basis of our conversation subject. As I mentioned, we've taken on board some of the comments that we had previously. We are currently reporting some delay against some of our strategic objectives, but we are confident that we'll be able to be back on track by the end of the financial year. So we've pulled out some key themes around recruitment and procurement, and we've taken action as an executive team to make sure that we can support the enabling functions that support all the business aims and objectives. So under education and training, just to pick out some key points, I suppose the final recruitment rate for medical specialty training was 91%. Previously it's been higher, but this still results in an increased number of trainees overall. Dental foundation, discussed previously that we've had a slight dip in recruitment there, and then we've discussed the issues in dental training for in a previous meeting. For pharmacy, our registration rate was 94.6%, which is way above the UK average, which is a real positive. And health professional education. So although I think we discussed fill rates and attrition, our, I suppose, overall recruitment rate at 94.5% is still a positive story. And the sort of more detailed report obviously gives more information on quality and our internal performance in terms of statutory mandatory training and PADR and what have you. So I wasn't going to talk through any more detail, but if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer or ask my colleagues to help.
Okay, so any comments, John?
Thank you, Chair. Rhiannon, thank you very much for the report that we've had and this updated performance report. I have to say, I think it's a significant improvement. I was left after reading it with a far better understanding of where we are and what the issues that we have to face. I like the fact that it was, again, linked to our strategic aims and our objectives. The 5, is it, I think we've got?
To name but a few.
I'm doing it, yeah. And the narrative was helpful. So I think I accept this is a journey and that this, it's development, but I think it should be acknowledged the work that your team and the rest of the exec have put into this paper. I certainly noticed it. What I would say, whilst it gives us a degree of assurance, what might be helpful to consider is that where we've got either objectives or strategic aims that are still in amber or in red, what needs to be done so that we are aware as a board, but what moves this from amber to a green? So I'm just saying that that's going to be for next board, but in terms of moving us forward, how do we as a board be made aware of what we need to do and what resources may be needed to actually shift this from where it is to where perhaps it should be? And that's a strategic level, and whether there are any risks or any resource implications for that. And there may be some where the board needs to be aware that actually this is beyond our control because it relies on partners. And if that's the case, then we need to be made aware of that and not read it as if, well, what are we not doing then? So I welcome the performance. I particularly like the dashboard. I think that was very helpful as well as high level. But again, it's moving us for me. It was enabling me to gain that board assurance. So I thank you very much indeed for the work that's been put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, an exceptionally thorough piece of work, and I can see how, as an iterative process, this as a performance report has continued to change. What I value, and it's towards the back end of the document actually, but just thinking around page 22, 23 onwards, there is reference there to some of the financial impacts, particularly around, and this will come on, I think, next slide, Chair, at the 4.2 on the finance report. But the challenges of where we have a shortfall in the fill rate or an increasing rate of attrition, and obviously there are financial consequences with that. What I would like to see, and I don't know whether this is doable, we are capturing a significant range of activity and demonstrating how we are achieving our aims in the IMTB. But we're also spending a significant amount of public money in attempting to achieve all of that. And I don't know how straightforward it would be, but I would like us to try and reference where we could what it is we're spending and the delivery of these actions that secure all the different aims that we've set out in the IMTB. Because I know you and your department have got a huge amount of data in terms of what we spend and how we spend it, but trying to align some of that so that we can say as a reference report, look, here is the range of activity, here's what we're spending to secure it, and as a consequence, we therefore know, or we should know in this, the impact of what it is we're doing. I think that link between spend and activity is really
Jill is smiling here.
well, no, I know. I, as vice chair of audit, I would say to my chair of audit that I think she and I are on the same page. But I think it's again from an assurance point of view, but also demonstrating, Chair, the value of what it is we are achieving with the resources that we've been allocated, and therefore making that big difference as a result.
And never more has there been a more important time to be doing that.
Final point, if I can, it sort of does relate to the next item, but I'll bring it up here. The challenge of the attrition rate. Rhiannon, on the report says that we effectively budget for a 3% attrition rate in allied health professions, 3% in midwifery, and 4.5% in nursing. But the attrition rate now for AHPs is 5%, for midwifery is 8%, and for nursing it's 10%. So it's double. The attrition rate in nursing is double what we'd anticipated. And again, I think maybe it will come on in the next paper, but again, some assurance of how we'll respond to that. I know that some of these things are out of our control, but clearly our work with the university sector fundamentally important there in terms of identifying those challenges and responding. But clearly the attrition rate is much higher, particularly on nursing, than we'd anticipated. I think just to raise that concern or just to acknowledge it.
So we have got commissioning arrangements, we have got contracts with HEIW. So part of the contract management and that commissioning process is to tackle and overall these issues. And I know these from the team absolutely are. So we've got a range of actions and ways that have been agreed with those HEIs to tackle all of these, these different levels. So
I'm picking up what what the team was suggested earlier, that what is the cause of that attrition and when did it happen? Did it happen in year 1, 2, or whatever? And therefore, if those people are not actually attaining to the standards actually to deliver that program, is there something else? And we do that actually even at the beginning, actually, where if a student actually aspired actually to come onto our programs actually through UCAS or whatever, if they're not actually achieved that or if you've not actually got any help from it needed, we're also in discussion actually with HEIWs at that point as well to say, well, how can we actually sort of introduce them or keep them actually into the workforce as well? So there is work going on. But now that we've got better data and actually a better contract arrangement actually with the HEIs, that is actually going to enable us to do much more in that arena.
Quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, sir. In terms of the attrition rate, I know in previous meetings we had a whole series of different charts and data that set out fill rates and attrition rates per institution. Obviously, what's been now identified in October, is a position that's getting more challenging. Could we get an update as to the fill rate and attrition rate for each institution to see where some of the challenges are? I know some were better or worse than others, but it would be useful for us to get
That can go through the education.
Yeah, I was going to say, go through the
Policy
education committee.
committee.
Right, okay, fine. Okay.
Yeah, Tina? Is it-
Yeah, and in fact, when you look at the attrition rate, Wales is considerably lower than England, Scotland and Northern Ireland in terms of the attrition rate, in some places 23–25%. That's not, in those courses. So it's not that we're complacent about it, but that's one of the comments that we've had also, is to say, that's why I said, what level do we leave at? Because in Wales, they have an opportunity to go into a healthcare support worker role at the end of year 1 and maybe up to level 4 at the end of year 2 with a diploma, if they met that criteria. That's why we've asked for that data, in which case that would help the healthcare support worker stuff. So to say it's attrition to the degree status, but not necessarily. So we've asked for that. And the other thing, the Chair, is we've also asked for first destination to see how we fulfill the commissions against what we anticipated we would, because people take time off from maternity leave and come back, so come out and then they come back. So there's quite a lot of data that we do as a education ECQC we look at.
So what I'm getting is that this report is useful. It's progressing. It gives a level of assurance that we can start to ask and answer questions, and it's certainly given an opportunity to join up some dots which have played out right across today's meeting. And in terms of the committee's agenda, it underlines the importance of the investment actually getting into what it's meant to do, deliver a workforce that's out there providing care for people. So the board is asked to note the content of the report, and I think we should say, and welcomes the progress being made in its development. Is that okay with everybody?
There was one question, just in relation to the attrition rate, because there was the bursary paper and the change into the bursary. It'd be useful to look to see whether the impact of the bursary has had on a slight increase, because it used to be 9%, now 10%.
The truth is the cost of living runaway train is impacting not just on the students, but on their families and on their communities. So there's a real issue here. If we're going to really move our organisation, and if Wales genuinely wants to support community resilience, it is about valuing those people in training who are going to be part of the earners. They've got to be able to afford to live. So we know there's industrial action coming, but actually being a learner, being someone in training at this moment in time, we need to recognise those extra needs that are there. And I know we are doing that, but there's a bigger thing that government needs to be involved with. Okay, are you okay with that recommendation then?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm moving us on now to hello, Rihanna, the finance report for month 7, and thank you for your very comprehensive report.
So the paper sets out the financial position as at the end of month 7. So we reported an unspent of 749,000. So there isn't much more detail in Appendix 1 about the breakdown of that across expenditure headings and across the executive director portfolios. But we have also actioned the handback 7 million that was agreed earlier in the year, and due to our current forecast, which is showing a significant underspend because of fill rates in that October cohort. If you remember, the original handback was around the spring cohort and the delayed start of some of the new education contracts. What we have now is related to this October cohort and fill rates and attrition. The fill rates in year 1 and attrition from year 2 and 3. So that's generating 4.3 million of underspend.
We also have an underspend forecast against GP training. So actually, sort of in complete contrast to the last couple of years, we've currently got exactly the same number of trainees that we should have. So we've recruited the numbers, but more have started in secondary care than in primary care. And because of that shift in the model, which is about 20, and they're about 70k each, depending on where they are.
Small numbers, big impact.
Yeah, exactly right. So that is generating £1 million of underspend against our budgets. We've already mentioned the under recruitment to dental foundation training, that is giving us a forecast underspend. And then we've got sort of general underspend across our pay and non-pay budgets. So I know we talk about vacancy, but sometimes there's a gap between when one person leaves and another person starts, and that sort of generates underspend. Non-pay budgets are generally for conferencing and events and sort of this sort of activity, and we're not getting back to sort of pre-COVID levels. So we're generating underspend there, and we've got an opportunity now in doing the financial plan going forward to really sort of challenge people over those budgets and see if they could be better utilised. But all of this is generating a current forecast of just over 7.5 million. So we're recommending at this point that we hand back that 7.5 million at this point in the year. And Welsh Government are comfortable with allowing us to sort of run our position until February, because that sort of clarification over exactly how many students have taken up the bursary could generate slightly more underspend. So the balance sheet information is set out here. We have a really small discretionary capital allocation. I do have a draft plan of how we intend to spend that this year. We'll be taking it through exec team next week. We've also been asked if we have any other opportunities to spend capital, because there's slippage on the sort of central capital budget. So yeah, we're investigating anything that we can do with that as well. I was pleasing to note that we're still achieving the public sector payment policy. But basically, yeah, so asking for approval to hand back that 7.5 million at this point.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Jill?
I'll try and be brief, Chair. The position we understand, because we've been through it a few times, and it's always disappointing, as we know, to hand back money when in the current situation. And one of the things that I think might be confusing to anybody reading the report is that the budget doesn't appear to be 15 million, 16 million underspent. And I think it should be reflective of that, because we've already handed back 7 and 7.5. But it appears on the face of it that we're about 700k underspent. So your average reader would say, well, where are they finding the 7 million from? So my view is that we ought to be reflecting that in that we've changed the budget. So I think we probably ought to go back to our original budget and reflect that in the interest of transparency, open reporting, all the rest of it. So that's my first point. The second one was on capital. So I'm pleased to hear that there is a plan, and I knew there was slippage. Is there nothing, because I asked the question on the simulation paper, is there anything that we could invest in that would actually help that? The third question is on trade and other payables. I'm going to stop asking the question, because every time I ask the question, it goes up more. I'm just wondering, how are we going to get control over that? Because it's gone up so significantly again. And the last one was, while we're meeting the public sector payment policy, we're not meeting the NHS. And that, to me, seems to be the easier side of the coin, but I assume they're disputed invoices or whatever. But it ought to be a straightforward transfer in this day and age, without any issues at all. So those are my questions.
So yeah, we're really sort of toiling at that on the NHS sort of public sector payments, because obviously, yeah, we'd like to get that to be above 95% as well. The training and the payable. So if you remember, we talked about contracts and the mechanism under the contract. So the variation orders enable us to pay the correct amount, so that sort of balance growing is something that will always happen until we get into the new contracts. So it's not that we're not progressing it, that is a standard pattern until we start paying the right amount for new students under those contracts. So the new contracts, the variation order now, orders now have been signed, isn't they? So I think we should be starting to reflect the new payments. So yeah, I can have a look at exactly
within the
when.
next financial year,
Yeah, it should be now.
within this financial year.
Yeah, so I think we're probably talking about two different things, aren't we? I think in terms of the credit balance we've got now is related to the fact that we're not paying for the new cohort of students yet, and that will catch up with itself, and we will be paying that. And that's how we get to a much lower credit balance at year end, and that's what we're comparing to in that balance sheet, isn't it? The new contracts went live from September. So the mechanism is different. We pay the commissioned numbers, not the last year's numbers, and then we've got to catch up. So we'll be in a different position. Absolutely take your point on forecast, because it is all happening behind the scenes. So the mechanism for handback is we are transferring the budget into month 12. We're showing it in the monitoring return. So you'll see in that monitoring return detail, we've got a -7 million for the original handback from our total allocation. There's an opportunity to risk schedule in the monitoring return, so the 7.5 is included in there. So we're dealing with it through that allocation process. But yeah, I absolutely accept that forecast, and as that changes through the year, is not in the board report, so we can move that one forward. And I think the schemes that we are aware of there's endoscopy equipment, isn't there?
Yeah, endoscopy is an area that last year we explored the opportunities of capital fund actually to sort of support the development of that capital. And I think that we came against a timescale, but now we're ahead of that. And actually, obviously, we did the investigation of what was needed last year, so we can actually inform that going forward. So.
Our laptop spend comes out to that capital budget as well, so we will be spending against that. We've got a mechanism towards the within a working week. So we're not, and we've also developed a capital refresh plan, so that because we're now coming up to the 4 years, with the normal end of life for a laptop is 5, so we've agreed to take that through our digital leadership group, what that looks like, but that would involve the additional civic money coming through Welsh Government, and we've got a plan for if we get it, and if we don't, but that I can share that with you.
Okay. Any more questions or comments on this report? So I'm going to take us through the recommendations now, everybody. So eyes down, look in. Note the financial position reported for HEIW at month 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Note the actions progressed to be in balance at year end, being a return of 7 million to the Welsh Government. Yeah. Consider the recommendation to hand back a further 7.5 million in this financial year for the reasons as explained and outlined in the report.
Yes.
Note the summarised explanation of key variations by directorate.
Yeah.
Note the capital allocation spend to date and the development of plans to utilise that. And note the balance sheet position.
Yeah.
And there's also a recommendation from the discussion today that we report the balance sheet against the original budget. Yeah. Everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rhiannon. Dafydd, corporate risk register, strategic risk. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly, i fyddai mor grynas yn bosib, mae amser yn eitha heibio a mae cymryd gan taw gweithio chyfle gallen yn y papur. Papur i'w nodi ydy hon, mwyn sicrwydd bod yna gyfanswm o 12 risg ar gyfrestr. O'r rhain mae 2 yn goch, 8 yn amber a 2 yn wyrdd. Mae tri risg newydd ar y gofrestr, sef risg 45, ac mae'r ddau yma yn ymwneud gyda risgiau sy'n codi o uno Health Education England. Mae un risg newydd arall, sef risg 16 yn ymwneud â oedi wrth cymeradwyo cynllun addysg a fforddiant. A mae risg newydd yma wedi cael ei asesu ar goch gyda llaw. Fel o'n i'n dweud yn cynharach, mae yna ddau risg coch ac yr un risg coch arall ydy'r un sydd yn ymwneud â seibr diolch. Felly, priwnodi ydy hon, Cadeirydd.
Diolch. Now, I attended on Ruth's behalf the Vice Chair's meeting, and there was a presentation on the impact of a cyber attack on a software company called Adastra and its impact across the UK on 111 services. 111 services are being used by the public like hotcakes. There was a fantastic response across the service and supported by DHCW to the attack. But there was one key message that rang home to me. You can do all you can to protect yourselves from cyber attack, but the other side of the coin is if you were unlucky enough to have that attack, what would you do to have business continuity? So I just think it's not just what we do to protect ourselves, it's what we would do if and when we get cyber attacked. And I just thought I would highlight that here because it is a really important other side of the coin. Are there any questions for David for this corporate risk register?
Chair, can I just ask for some clarification with regards to 2 points. Firstly, with regards to the corporate risk register, in terms of progress against some of these risks, considering we're in November, why is the progress only up to September in some cases they're dated? And you know, some explanation why that's the position that's been reported. And in terms of the strategic risk, we've got the register for the corporate, but just a list in terms of the strategic. So, you know, the strategic for the corporate risk, we've got a register with which has been brand rated, etc. In terms of the strategic appendix 2, what I've got here is a list of the risks that we've got. You have done the same for strategic as the and I found the corporate risk register helpful. Whereas with the strategic risks, it says what they are without any detail of their rag rating, their status, what mitigations are in place, etc. I'm just wondering why the difference.
So with regards to the first point, so you're looking at the actual corporate risk register as at the end of October, because that's when it is in the cycle, and obviously we're in November. So there are some references there where the position has changed since September. With regards to your second point, I need to take that back, but that's the approach that we've always taken. That's the approach that I've seen in other health boards. So I'm happy to have a discussion with you.
I think the point is you found it helpful. I think there should be a discussion about how we develop this.
Yeah, you know,
well, actually, the strategic risks are the subject of the board development session. Actually, since quite some point.
Yeah. So we'll have a fulsome discussion on how to develop that at the next board development session. Okay, so I'm asking people to note the report for assurance and note HEIW strategic risks for information, and we will further develop the strategic risk register following the session at the board development section. Okay. Thank you. You happy with those recommendations? Yes. In committee decisions, Dav?
It's a paper just for noting, so summary of the decisions made at the last closing of the board.
Okay. Everybody happy to note those? Thank you. To receive a key issue report from the Audit and Assurance Committee.
the report's there, but I'm assuming everybody's been able to read it. There's just a few points I wanted to make quickly. We continue to receive reasonably good scores from our internal auditors, which is always good news. We have a couple of substantial assurances from the last one, so that's a commendation, I think, to everybody for that. And also the structured assessment from Audit Wales was reasonably assuring and complimentary about some of our processes. So I think that the board need to note that, because we had a thorough discussion on that. There were some findings, as you would expect, some recommendations, and I'm assuming that those will be coming back in due course. Two more points very quickly. Fraud, we're still progressing the risk assessment, and that's coming back to the next audit committee. I know that officers, HEIW officers, particularly Rhiannon and Martin, have been heavily involved in that. We're not there yet. And interestingly, it was the first keynote address at the SIP conference last Thursday was on body's response to fraud. So it is very pertinent at the moment. So that's work in progress. And then in terms of the losses, we're still suffering some overpayments on salaries. And just to note that procedures are being tightened, just for board's information, but that the audit committee will be inviting representatives should those continue. So appear before them.
Not like a wedding invitation.
Just on the first point around the information governance and IGR, which would be reported to the audit committee. That's now scheduled back in the diary for next week. And just Tina's point earlier about where we do additional resources, that's an area where we've actually taken the opportunity for somebody else and put extra resources in while we wait for the substantive. And we're going to double round to make sure handover. So I think it's a positive example that we've got some short-term staff in and being able to get it back when we need it.
Yeah, just to confirm, following Jill's comments with regards to the recommendations from the structured assessment, they are on the audit tracker and will be reported back to the audit committee.
Okay, so thank you, Jill. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. The board's asked to note the content of the report from the Chair of Audit and Assurance Committee for assurance. I ask you to note. And then an update on the preparation for the COVID-19 public inquiry, which is in progress and gathering pace. David.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly papur i'w nodi gwybodaeth ydy hon. Mae'n awynellu y gwaith mae AaGIC wedi i wneud wrth baratoi ar gyfer yr ymchwiliad cyhoeddus. Mae'r adroddiad yn cynnwys cyfeiriadau at y llinell amser yn wedi greu, a mae'r llinell amser yn ymgorffori ymateb AaGIC i'r pandemig yn ei gyfanrwydd. A sy'n jyst yn hoffi cydnabod yr holl waith a wnaethpwyd gan Cathy wrth dynnu'r gwaith at ei gilydd. Mae'r waith sylweddol yn diolch yn fawr. Thanks Cathy for that. Mae'r llinell amser yn hanfodol ar gyfer y paratodiadau ar gyfer y cyhoeddus. Nid yn unig o ran ein galluogi i ymateb i gyfynion yr archwiliad ar gyfer gwybodaeth yn gyflym, ond mae hefyd yn galluogi ni i canfod ein penderfynwyr allweddol. Wrth gwrs, mae'r gwaith yr archwiliad yn mynd rhagddi, felly mi fyswn hoffi sy'n sylw y pwyllgor at 2 awr o waith y pwyllgor sydd yn gyfredol. Yn gyntaf, modiwl 3 a'r penderfyniad a ddylid gwneud cais i AaGIC i fod yn gyfranwyr craidd neu co-participant. Mae'r archwiliad bellach wedi cyhoeddi ysgol mod 3 yn ei gyfanrwydd ac dwi o farn na ddylid gwneud cais gan nad ydynt yn bodloni'r meini prawf. Ond da ni hefyd wedi gofyn i'r fas gyfreithiwr i edrych ar y criteria gwybod adrodd o dydd Llun. Mae yr ail bwynt ydy, mae cyrff iechyd o fewn y gwasanaeth iechyd yng Nghymru wedi bod yn ystyried cael cynrychiolaeth ar y cyd o ran cynrychiolaeth cyfreithiol. Mae yna fanteision i hynny mewn ffurfiol o ran arbed arian, ond o safbwynt AaGIC, a dwi'n meddwl cyrff tebyg i AaGIC fel HEIW, mae'r ffaith bod ni mor wahanol i weddill cyrff o gwasanaeth iechyd. Mae'n anodd iawn gweld sut bydd yna gyfleon i gwneud gwaith ar y cyd o ran ymateb i'r archwiliad, a gan hynny byddwn ni ddim yn edrych i gael cynrychiolaeth ar y cyd. Felly papur yn nodi
So it's reaching a certain point in time. And there's clearly some key things for us to take a position on. And I suggest that we ask the board to note this report and that we will keep the board informed of what our final position is, as how we're going to be represented and which parts of which tack we're going to take in our part in this inquiry. Is that okay? Yeah. You will note then under 5.2 that we've got the Shared Service Partnership Committee Assurance Report. That's for information. I've not received any other urgent business, thank God. I've singularly failed you, colleagues. This is the longest I've ever gone over, so it is some record I'm not proud of. And I need to remind you that the board development session will be held on the 15th of December, and we've already signalled some important issues that we need to work on in that development session. The next formal board will be held on the 26th of January 2023, so Happy New Year. And I now resolve that the board goes back in committee. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, everybody.